What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. Danny and Bush coming at you to break down the fantasy football draft strategy that we believe is the best for those of you guys that pick in the middle of the first round in your fantasy draft. So if you guys pick number 5, number 6, number 7, or number 8, this is the video for you. In this video, we're going to break down some of the strategies that you can employ based on the players that we've seen, be on the board at this point in the draft, and based on all the experience me and you have had drafting on underdog drafts this summer and doing drafts and practicing for our home leagues as well from this area of the draft. And then at the end, we're going to do 2 sets of mock drafts from the first 8 rounds, the early round draft strategy portion. I'll be drafting from 8 spot, and Danny will be drafting from the 5 spot in the first one, and then I'll be drafting from 6. He'll be drafting from 7. So if you guys missed yesterday's video, it was picks 1 to 4. We'll have picks 9 to 12 for you tomorrow. But Danny, how you doing?
Doing well. And yeah, we'll do our best to outline our thought process at each of these picks and ideally what we're going to be employing in terms of the certain strategies we'll use from picks 5 to 8, as Corey kind of alluded to in that intro. But another thing we have to remember is that this video is outlining certain tier breaks and buckets of players that we're comfortable with. And as always, if anything falls your way in your drafts, you have to be liquid, you have to be water, you can't be marked to a specific strategy.
Yeah, exactly. So if you guys enjoy this video at any point, as always, hit the like button, comment any of your thoughts down below, subscribe to the channel if you are new. Check out the Patreon for more rookie content, for more fantasy draft content, redraft content. Our rankings are available on there. All that good stuff linked down below in the description. But without further ado, let's hit the intro. Okay, so last year, when we did this video, we called it the mercy of the draft board strategy because last year there was a couple top-tier running backs. We had Davante Adams at the top of the draft, and we had, a risky proposition like Saquon Barkley. We also had Ezekiel Elliott that a lot of people were in on. This year, the strategy is a little bit different depending on which of these picks you have. The fundamental principle and the most important thing that you guys can get from this entire video, and I'm sure plenty of you guys will ask this comment in the comment section down below after this video is over, whether you pick 5, whether you pick 6, whether you pick 7, or whether you pick 8, there's one constant. If an elite wide receiver falls to you, you smash draft on them. So typically that will be Jamar Chase because Cooper Kupp and Justin Jefferson typically go off the board as the top 2 wide receivers before you'll even be picking at 5, 6, 7, or 8. But if any of those guys fall to you, absolutely smash draft of them. And also, if Jamar Chase falls to you at 5, at 6, at 7, or at 8, he is an auto pick for us in this area of the draft.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple. Those top 3 receivers this year are in that tier of their own. Obviously, we like guys like Adams, we got guys like Diggs, where, spoiler, they're going to be some of the top considered players in this range. But I'm not just going to force a running back pick. I kind of mentioned it on yesterday's video, but basically, we view that first and second pick being Jonathan Taylor and Christian McCaffrey as a tier of their own at running back. And after those are gone, I would much rather get that elite advantage at the wide receiver spot rather than just force, the RB 3 to 5 in consensus off the board. Of course, we will see in these mock drafts how the board kind of adapts to us once we make these picks. But ultimately here, tier 1 wide receiver over tier 2 running back any day.
Yeah, exactly. Again, if you guys have a differing view, it's your draft. Do whatever you want. This is just how we are viewing the top 5 overall picks. We think it's those 3 receivers and those 2 running backs. Let's say you're on the board at 106 and Jefferson and Kupp went at 103, 104. Jamar Chase went at 105. And you're staring the board at 6, at 7, or at 8. And all those receivers are off the board. The top 2 running backs are off the board as well. In our opinion, this is the single worst case scenario, the single worst draft spot that you can have if the board plays out that way. So if the answer to the question, if you guys are wondering, where's the best spot to draft from? In the first video, we talked about it yesterday. It's 1 or 2. In this video, the worst spot to draft from of all the top 12 spots is 6, 7, or 8, assuming those top 5 elite tier players are off the board. And the reason we think this is the worst spot is because in this area of the draft, those players that we have valued there are routinely available later in the first round.
Yeah, I mean, the top 3 options that we like in that range, assuming, of course, Kupp, Jefferson, and Chase are off the board. The 3 options we like the most are Davante Adams, Austin Eckler, and Saquon Barkley. Eckler, I mean, usually goes in this range, so I think that's about a fair assumption in terms of his ADP. But in terms of Adams and Saquon, with Adams, he's more of a 1-2 turn type of pick in terms of ADP, and Saquon Barkley is actually a early to mid-second round pick on most sites. So forcing a pick that again, we have ranked that way, but ADP, they usually go later. Forcing that pick at the 7 or 8 spot, as opposed to, say, if we were picking at the back of the first round and getting to wrap with 2 of them, is much less ideal than I'd want it to be. So for us, again, at that spot, specifically with Saquon Barkley, because I mean, if you have to reach a couple picks, so be it. But with Saquon Barkley, given the fact that he is my RB3, given the fact that he is my next player off the board, I'd much rather, again, at that point, if somebody in your league is very high on Derrick Henry, Austin Eckler, or somebody like that, and would rather, do a pick swap, I'd more feel comfortable doing that as opposed to just taking Saquon Barkley at 7 overall because that's my next highest rated guy.
Yeah, exactly. If you have the option to switch picks with somebody who's picking 10 or picking 11 or picking 12 or something like that, I would highly suggest you do so. But we want to prepare for the worst case scenario. We want to prepare in case those top 3 receivers are off the board, in case those top 2 running backs are off the board. But obviously, if those guys slide, then we thank our lucky stars that happened. If you're in a really casual league, that might end up happening, but we're going to do these mock drafts, and hopefully the board falls in a way that we're able to prepare for that worst case scenario at 106, 107, and 108. We are not drafting. Another important part of this video is that we are not drafting Derrick Henry, Dalvin Cook, and Najee Harris in this area of the draft. I'm sure many people are comfortable doing that. We are personally not comfortable doing that. We would rather take Adams. We'd rather take Eckler. We would rather take Saquon Barkley in this kind of small tier above those next rated running backs like Derrick Henry, like Najee Harris. And from a strategy perspective, picking 5 and 6, who we have, Jamar Chase and Devontae Adams ranked there, you have a very good shot of getting a Saquon Barkley and Alvin Kamara, Javonte Williams and DeAndre Swift, Leonard Fournette, Joe Mixon, Aaron Jones, whatever running back you value in the second round to fall back to you in round 2. And you can still build out a nice hero RB, get yourself an elite advantage at wide receiver with Chase or with Adams. And then if you're picking 7 or 8 and Austin Eckler or Saquon Barkley is the guy that you go with in that area of the draft, you can still get a Swift, Kamara, Javonte, Fournette, Mixon, Jones, etc. to fall back to you and build out a superhero RB that way. The one mistake, though, that you can't make is the one that Danny's going to outline in a second.
The one mistake you cannot make. Okay, so in the 1 to 4 video, we kind of mentioned that for the most part, it's predictive as to what exactly is going to be looking at us on the turn. In this 5 to 8 range, because again, Corey said, you're at the mercy of the draft board, whatever people are doing around you. If you see, for example, in that first and second round area, the 2 players you end up getting based off, best player available is going to end up being, let's say, Jamar Chase, and somehow like CeeDee Lamb falls to you in round 2. Do not be forced, do not be coerced, do not be scared into forcing, your James Conner in the 3rd round and Ezekiel in the 4th round, because you have to catch up at running back. The biggest mistake you can do in this spot, if you go wide receiver, being at the mercy of the draft board, is force mid running back picks in the running back dead zone. The only archetype of running back you should be fine with taking in this range are ones that have legitimate shots at being 18, 19, 20 plus PPR points per game. If you are going to take a running back in round 4, instead of gearing to the safe volume that everybody wants to pin on a guy like Ezekiel Elliott, taking a guy like Travis Etienne, where you have the elite advantage at wide receiver and you start filling out your flex spot at wide receiver. And now you have that anchor running back with Travis Etienne that can be this year's DeAndre Swift. Don't just draft Ezekiel Elliott because you can project his workload. Draft Travis Etienne, given the upside, given the explosive ability, given the pass utilization we could see on that Jaguars offense this year for him.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll outline exactly where those tier breaks end up being, the archetypes that we're going after, and maybe we'll even draft some of those guys in the mock drafts that we're going to do. So we're going to start, like I said, Danny's going to pick from the 5 slot. I'm going to pick from the 8 slot. Let's get right into the mocks. All right, so we are in the draft right now. Danny is picking 5. As we kind of talked about, the number 1 rule of this range is that if Jamar Chase, who's the likely guy to fall to you, is there, you're going to go after him. If Jefferson or Kupp somehow falls there, I'm sure that's going to be a smash pick for you, but we'll see how the board goes. In more casual leagues, you're going to see running backs flying fast and furious off the board like they did in this scenario, and you do get an opportunity to draft Justin Jefferson here. Again, I don't want to say that this is the likely scenario of happening. Again, you want to prepare for the worst case scenario and adjust accordingly, but this could very well happen. If you guys pick at 5, you could definitely see a Derrick Henry and Austin Eckler and Najee Harris, a running back going off the board ahead of Justin Jefferson or Cooper Kupp. And in this case, you just easily take Justin Jefferson here.
Yep, smashing Justin Jefferson. And Corey kind of said it. This could be a case in more home leagues where maybe even Austin Eckler is in the spot of Cooper Kupp, and you are looking at the first wide receiver off the board in your home league at 105. Again, in a more sharp, advanced room, you're typically going to be looking at the wide receiver 3 off the board at this 105. But I'm thanking my lucky stars. I'm glad that, again, it's a more home league dynamic where I can just smash Justin Jefferson, a very good shot at finishing as the wide receiver 1 overall this year at the 5th overall pick.
Yeah, and to the same point, it looks like Sleeper gave us a casual draft room because, like I said, if any of the three elite wide receivers fall to you, whether you're picking at 5, whether you're picking at 6, whether you're picking at 7, or whether you're picking at 8, you hit auto smash on those players. And Jamar Chase fell to me at 8 here, which is a scenario that I have seen play out on Sleeper. Sleeper specifically, if you're using this platform for your draft, does not have Jamar Chase ranked inside the top 5, 6, 7 overall players in ADP. And if you're in a more casual league, players tend to just follow whatever the ADP says rather than adjust their own rankings and put their own twist on things. So Jamar Chase here at 108. Again, I'm just going to thank my lucky stars that Jamar Chase fell here. We'll try and make sure that that scenario doesn't play out in the second mock draft that we do to show you the more worst case scenario range of outcomes. But we're in a great spot in this first mock draft.
Yeah, we're pairing up the two LSU guys on each of our teams. Also wanted to give a quick disclaimer, but if you're able to start off your draft with Jamar Chase in the 8th spot and then still see like CeeDee Lamb, Alvin Kamara, Saquon Barkley looking you at the face with your second round pick, again, thank your lucky stars for your league mates. Another point I want to kind of reiterate that is really underrated, doesn't get talked about enough, is that if you're drafting online versus live, a lot of live drafts, you're going to see, people are going to use their favorite sites. They're going to, print off their draft sheets. They're going to follow their favorite experts. And it might be, honest to God, either an extreme of way off the board picks, or it's going to be a more sharper draft because people are following the people that they follow the most, if that makes sense. So your Matthew Berry or, your Nick Ercolano or whoever their favorite analyst is, FSC, whoever their favorite analyst is, they may have their cheat sheet according to that. But if you're drafting online, you're going to see if you're drafting on Sleeper, people are more likely to default to what the rankings are. So you could have valuations where a guy like CeeDee Lamb, a guy like Alvin Kamara, a guy like Saquon Barkley are staring you at the face at that 205 spot. Pick your poison bush. I think you're happy with any single one of these picks.
Yeah, I mean, I get my 5th overall player in Jamar Chase. I get my 8th overall player in Saquon Barkley. It is a very easy start to me. And again, Saquon Barkley in the sleeper ADP is buried further than he is in underdog ADP. He's definitely buried further than where we have him ranked currently. So you're on the board here. You also have your share of a couple running backs that are going to make pretty easy picks for you. You go with Alvin Kamara there. Obviously, the suspension concern. This isn't really necessarily a micro player takes video, but at this point, we view Kamara in that tier with Barkley, with Swift, with Javonte Williams, with Leonard Fournette as that second tier of running back that are honestly very, comparable to your Austin Ecklers, to your Najee Harris's, to your Dalvin Cooks, Joe Mixons, whatever, Derrick Henry's that go in the mid part, sometimes early part, as was the case with Derrick Henry at 102 of the first round.
Exactly. So again, we have very similar starts to our drafts in elite wide receiver with a huge upside play at the running back position. The one thing I kind of want to add to here. So let's just say I went with Justin Jefferson, but a common question I get, let's just say I took Jamar Chase at that last pick. A lot of people would wonder, well, if I have Jamar Chase in the first round and my best player available is T. Higgins, do I take a receiver from the same team? The answer that we both have is, quite frankly, if they are the best player on the board, you take them. Especially in this instance where if it was a worse offense, maybe you consider it a little bit more. But because the Bengals are going to have such a good passing offense, such a high value passing offense, if I was forced in a situation where I had Jamar Chase and T. Higgins was my best player available, I'm still taking the stud from the Cincinnati Bengals and hoping, again, that offense is as good as I anticipate it being. So I'm going to go T. Higgins here. But again, pretend if I had Jamar Chase there, I would still make the same pick.
Yeah, and I think the decision becomes more, applicable when you have, let's say, for example, I draft Najee Harris at like the 10th spot, and at the end of the third round, Deontay Johnson's my best available wide receiver. Do I want to stack up on an offense that's not nearly as good as one like the Cincinnati Bengals? Then it becomes, favor guys within the same tier as a tiebreaker in that scenario.
Exactly.
So on the board right now, speaking of Deontay Johnson, him and Michael Pittman are my highest two rated wide receivers. Pittman actually being higher than Deontay Johnson. At running back, I have Cam Akers still on the board here. So I have the opportunity to build out a superhero RB, meaning you draft 2 anchor running backs before round 3, most likely. And then you skip over that RB dead zone, hammer out wide receivers, grab an elite quarterback or an elite tight end. I am going to do that. I'm going to take that opportunity because Cam Akers is, to me, just him and Travis Etienne are both tier breaks at the running back position. Akers is the guy I have rated higher. Maybe you prefer Etienne because of the injury concern with Cam Akers. But either way, that is the guy I'm going to go with. I have Saquon Barkley, Cam Akers as my anchor running backs, Jamar Chase as an anchor wide receiver, and I can just continue, to hammer out wide receiver value because I figured there'd be some great guys that fell back to me, and there definitely was. DJ Moore, pretty easy pick for me there. He is my highest rated wide receiver. So I start off my draft with a pretty balanced approach, 2 running backs and 2 wide receivers. Again, you're at the mercy of the draft board. You could start out this draft with no running backs on your team, with three running backs on your team, if that's how the value fell. If one running back on your team, it really all depends what's going to fall to you. As we kind of talked about, these elite wide receivers are players we are willing to draft in round 1, and the tier 2 running backs are definitely priorities for us in round 2, and that's kind of how the board played out.
For sure. Excellent start to your draft. Obviously, getting again the superhero RB and then pairing DJ Moore with Jamar Chase. I'm on the board here. And although, again, Jalen Waddle is my highest rated player here, if I look down at the wide receiver position, I do see guys that I have in a similar tier, being guys like Marquise Brown, Allen Robinson, Jerry Jeudy, etc. there. The big tier break I see is at tight end, because after Darren Waller, I do view it as we're entering the tier 2 as opposed to Darren Waller still being a tier 1 player. So from a structural standpoint, I want to lock down Darren Waller. I think he's going to be an integral part of that Raiders offense and could be a threat for potentially the tight end 1 overall this year, I do think, with how good we expect the Raiders offense, particularly in the passing game, to be this year. So I'm fine with locking up Darren Waller there. We do see 5 wide receivers go off the board from my last pick, and that kind of sums it up. I was hoping Marquise Brown or Allen Robinson fall back to me. Both of them fell back, so I will go with Marquise Brown, who I have slightly higher.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense there. I have a couple guys on the board that I really, really like. That we're in the heap of the running back dead zone. You see Antonio Gibson going off the board? Absolutely freaking not at the 5-7. Same goes with guys like Elijah Mitchell and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. There's definitely players, depending on the site that you're using. And again, we'll be dropping videos on players that are undervalued on certain platforms. And the sleeper one will be the first one that we do, because most of our leagues are on sleeper, and it definitely helps us out to know that as well. But Elijah Mitchell and some of these dead zone running backs are extremely overvalued on the sleeper platform, and it just makes way too much sense to veer into the wide receiver landscape in this area to potentially go after an elite quarterback. Kyler Murray is definitely in consideration for me at this pick. I do really like some of the wide receivers on the board, though, so I am going to go. I went with Allen Robinson in the other video twice, so I'm just going to go with Mike Williams just for the sake of differentiating a little bit for the player that I'm going after. Plus, the league format, I don't know if I outlined it, 2 running back, 2 wide receiver, 1 flex. So I made it a little bit lighter in terms of the scoring format. And Mike Williams as a flex option is, high weekly ceiling type of option that we can go after as well. So I really like getting Mike Williams there. And somehow Kyler Murray fell back to me. So Kyler Murray, I know Danny was probably eyeing him given that he has Marquise Brown, but I am going to draft Kyler Murray here, get myself an elite quarterback to go along with my superhero running backs and my 3 elite wide receivers to fill out my 2 wide receiver spots and my flex.
Yep, and in this spot, I do see the final tier of that quarterback being Jalen Hurts go off the board a pick after. Side note: don't be like Team 7 where you have no wide receiver at all through 6 rounds. Not ideal there, but I mean, looking at the board, clearly I wanted one of those elite quarterbacks to fall. They did not, so I'm going straight back to the wide receiver. Well, pump it, load it, playing the ADP game here. I know Elijah Moore is listed a little bit down, so I'm going to take Rashad Bateman first and hope that Elijah Moore makes it back to me. Might be a little bit risky, but
yeah, makes a ton of sense. And like I said, it's all this stuff depends on your scoring format too. If you play in a deeper league, for example, my league format is a 3 wide receiver, 2 flex start. You might be more inclined to favor wide receivers over an elite quarterback in these mid rounds. Same goes for Danny taking Darren Waller where he took him. Maybe knowing that was the league format, you go with Jalen Waddle or something instead. All depends on your league scoring format. I know we got a ton of comments so far already on the picks 1 to 4 video asking, hey, my scoring format's a little bit different than yours. How would you adjust accordingly? We'll be happy to answer any questions you have down below as well. So I'm back on the clock here. The tight end position, I see a tier break. Dallas Goedert to me is I don't have Dallas Goedert in his own tier, but he feels like he is in his own tier with Dalton Schultz for me, where after those 5 elite tight ends, Dalton Schultz and Dallas Goedert kind of represent the last of the projectable top 5 upside tight ends. Whereas I like Zach Ertz, I like Dawson Knox, I like Pat Freiermuth, but I do see a difference in the floor ceiling combination of Dalton Schultz and Dallas Goedert versus those other guys. So I am going to go with Dallas Goedert here as my main tight end. I've, pretty much hammered out my entire starting lineup here, and I can just continue to, hammer out wide receiver values. As I talked about in the last video, we're not going to be breaking down late round sleepers or any picks after round 8. We're just talking early round strategy here, but the type of archetypes you want to go after in those late rounds, ambiguous backfields, handcuffs, pass catching running backs at the running back position, at wide receiver. If you're going to target wide receivers late in the draft, there's a lot of rookie wide receivers down there that are great targets to go after. A lot of second year, wide receivers late in the draft as well, like a Nico Collins type or a Josh Palmer type, for example, always usually make good late round targets. I'm back on the clock here. There's a couple wide receivers on the board that I still like. Brandon Ayuk, I believe, would be my highest rated wide receiver. Tony Pollard, I think, is my highest rated running back available right now. I'm going to go with Brandon Ayuk, just grab myself another wide receiver because I only have 3 of them at the moment, and I do want to fill out that depth a little bit more. Danny's back on the board.
Yep, for sure. And again, if we were 9 rounds or deeper, this would be a strategic play I would make. So I do know that Tony Pollard is my highest rated running back left. I also know that Trey Lance is by far my highest rated quarterback left. But playing the ADP game, I do see that Team 4, Team 3, Team 2, and Team 1 all have their quarterback ones locked up. So if we're playing the game where if they take Trey Lance, so be it. They just waste, again, an 8th round pick on a position that they already have taken care of in a 1 quarterback format. I would play the game. I would take Tony Pollard here and then hope, again, given the fact that they have quarterback 1 locked up, that Trey Lance would fall back to me. So for the purpose of this mock, Tony Pollard, get an upside RB2 there with him if Zeke were to miss any time. He's clearly a league winner at the running back position. And then, of course, he does have some standalone value in that Dallas offense. So I think the way we structured these 5 to 8 picks right now, number 5 and number 8, is about as good of a board, as about as good of a structured team as you could possibly hope for in, again, the mercy of the draft board spots.
Yeah, exactly. And in the next mock, we will make sure that is a little bit more difficult on us, that we don't get these elite wide receivers falling to us in case you guys are faced with the scenario where, the board goes chalky and those top 5 players are off the board, as we kind of mentioned. So you guys can see our team structurally. Danny built out a hero RB, grabbing Tony Pollard as his final running back 2. In that spot, and you fill out your wide receiver spots, you fill out some depth at your flex positions, you grab an elite tight end. Like you said, on the way back in round 9, you'd probably have your choice, at least not of Trey Lance. Matthew Stafford would most likely still be there as well, and you could go with a guy like him. For me, I built out, 3 wide receivers with Chase, DJ Moore, and Mike Williams to fill out my 2 spots and my flex. And I grabbed myself a superhero RB, Saquon Barkley and Cam Akers. Again, don't try not to focus too much on which players we pick, more so the structure of our team. And then I grabbed myself an elite quarterback, a guy that I think is going to be a very good tight end this year as well. And in the late rounds, I would continue, because my team is quite balanced, I would just continue to fill out, rookie wide receiver here, ambiguous backfield there, handcuff there, kind of later round picks.
Last thing I want to add too, before we get into the next mock, of course, is on paper, some people may look at Team 12 and be like, oh, well, you know what? That's a pretty well-built 0 RB team. You got your 4 receivers, and then you did your draft accordingly. But if you guys have watched our 0 RB strategy video, you would know that once you start like that in the first 4 rounds, do not take Elijah Mitchell and Kenneth Walker where he did. If you're at that point, it's much more valuable to you to take in the lead. He ended up getting Dak Prescott, fair play, but to keep stacking the wide receiver position or to get your onesies taken care of and then smash guys like Tony Pollard or Ramondre Stevenson, the lower opportunity cost back. Because as we kind of said in the last video, what is the difference in projection between a guy like Elijah Mitchell versus a guy like Ramondre Stevenson? One goes at the 5-12 here. The other one in Ramondre usually goes in the round 8, 9, 10 area.
Yeah, and speaking of that video that we're going to do, breaking down players that are great values on Sleeper, Ramondre Stevenson is one of those guys. He goes way lower on Sleeper than he goes on sharper ADP sites like Underdog Fantasy. So, yeah, exactly. You don't want to be doing, if you're going to build out a 0 RB, number one, I probably would say this is not the ideal league format to do so because it's only a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex type of league. And also, you want to make sure that if you are going to build out a 0 RB, avoid the RB dead zone, get your onesies taken care of. You had a very good opportunity to just take Kyler Murray at that 5-12 there and have that taken care of. And I don't hate the Kenneth Walker pick at the 7-12 as his first running back in that scenario, but I would disagree that 5-12 pick was not a great one. So let's move on to the next mock draft where we are picking from 6 and 7. All right, so we are on the board here with the second mock draft, and we have done ourselves a disservice and rigged it so that we are faced with the worst case scenario because many of you guys that are picking from 6 and picking from 7, if you play in sharper leagues where people know what they're doing and you're in a league format, this one's a little bit different than the last mock draft that we just did where it's a 3 wide receiver start instead of a 2 wide receiver start. You could start up to 4 wide receivers instead of 3. Then you might be faced with this decision where the top 5 elite 2 running backs and 3 wide receivers are off the board. You now have to make a reach, quote unquote, at 6 or, go with an ADP game, try and strategy around that with guys like Saquon Barkley, as we talked about in the strategy portion of this video. So I'm going to hit start draft here. The player that I have ranked at 106 is Davante Adams. It is a little early for him just based on where he goes, not necessarily where I have him ranked. He typically goes in this area of the draft, 109 to 112 range. But I have him ranked here because I believe he has, pretty much just as much capability of any of these top 3 wide receivers of the elite guys to finish as the wide receiver 1 overall, have a 22, 23, 24 point per game type of output this year. So I'm going to go with Davante Adams in a full PPR 3 wide receiver start league. I am totally cool with that pick. Although, like we said, this would be like the worst case doomsday scenario for somebody picking at 6 with the board the way that it fell.
I would have made the exact same pick, as you guys know, with Davante Adams there at 6. Now we're at a point where a little bit of game theory comes into it, because it all depends on how you think your league is going to behave. For me personally, I have Saquon Barkley as my next highest rated player. It's closely followed by Austin Eckler right after him. If your league, you're picking 7 and there is 0 chance that Saquon Barkley will fall back to you at the 206, take Saquon Barkley at 107. Given the ADP of this list, I know that there's a decent chance I can get the 2 next highest rated players on my board, given the fact that, as Corey's outlining, Saquon Barkley is buried in the sleeper ADP. So I'm going to risk it for the biscuit. I'm going to take Austin Eckler here and hope that Saquon Barkley makes it back to me at the 206.
Yeah, saw a lot of running backs flying off the board. It looks like they saw our wide receiver start and were fed up, but Danny does get his guy here, and I think even in that scenario, Saquon Barkley is your next highest rated player, but Alvin Kamara is also rated in your first round too. So in that case, you're probably fine. Worst case scenario, I get a guy like Alvin Kamara, I get a guy like Javonte Williams, who's still comparable, and I played the ADP game, and it did pay off for you in this case.
Yeah, because at this point, I would rather take the chance that I get both Eckler and Barkley, or Eckler and Kamara, than just go with Saquon, because I know Eckler's not making it back to me. So again, game theory perspective, you also failed to mention that CeeDee Lamb also fell to the 206. Obviously, again, I'm getting my next highest rated player with Saquon Barkley, but the fact that CeeDee Lamb fell past, Nick Chubb and Aaron Jones, like, this could happen in your own league. If that's the case, I don't mind picking at the 7 slot just as much. But that being said, Saquon Barkley, easy pick for me. I get, again, my 7th and 8th highest rated players at my spot, despite, again, only having 1 pick in the top 10.
Yeah, and speaking of getting 2 players that are in your top 10, I also get 2 players in my top 10. I have Alvin Kamara rated at 10. We know that the suspension is not likely to happen. We've heard it from legitimate sources like Adam Schefter and Ian Rappaport. Yes, could a video drop that he, assaulted somebody and he gets pulled off the field and suspended or put on the commissioner's exempt list during the season? It's a risk I'm willing to take, because 2.7 Alvin Kamara is worth that risk. If he was going at the 106 and you wanted to say, I don't want to make that risk in the early first round because of that, video still might exist, that's fine. But at the 2.7, that is baked into the cost, because if Alvin Kamara is on the field, one of the quietest top 5 running back seasons in PPR points per game that I think we ever saw last year, in an offense completely devoid of talent, with the starting quarterback going down in week 7. I think Alvin Kamara is an absolute steal here at 2.7.
Yeah, and I mentioned him on my contextualized game log series, where when Jameis Winston was healthy, this was a near 20 PPR point per game score in Alvin Kamara, despite the deflated passing volume we saw in the Saints offense. With Michael Thomas back, with Chris Olave added to this offense, with Jarvis Landry added, we should see a more open 11 personnel type of offense, rather than the one last year that just jammed Alvin Kamara up the gut because he was their only talented player. So I love Alvin Kamara. I think as long as he's on the field, he's basically a lock to be a top 5 running back, if I'm going to be honest. But either way, I love both of our starts. But can we talk about Team 5 too? Being able to go Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, and Mike Evans in the first 3 rounds. If you're able to start with that in terms of a 0 RB strategy, start like that in your home league because of the running back bias, that's another fantastic build to have on your team.
Yeah, exactly. If this team, hopefully this Team 5 doesn't screw it up, though, because they can still draft some dead zone running backs, but hopefully they go with some like elite onesies or whatever. On the board right now, Cam Akers is my highest rated running back, followed by Travis Etienne. At wide receiver, I have T. Higgins, I believe, is my highest rated wide receiver, followed by Keenan Allen. Those 2 guys at each position, they really are all ranked in the same area for me. So because I took Cam Akers already and I did a superhero RB build in the first mock draft, I'm going to take a wide receiver here. I'm going to go with T. Higgins. And we'll start out with a hero RB type of start with Alvin Kamara as my main guy there.
For sure. And I'm on the clock here. Keenan Allen and Michael Pittman are super, super close in my rankings. This would be a situation where if Keenan Allen was by far your wide receiver 1 available, despite still having Austin Eckler on this team, perfectly fine with going with Keenan Allen if he's your next highest rated player. Again, I have Michael Pittman slightly higher, so I will take Pittman regardless. But if you want to go Keenan Allen here, no problem with it.
Yeah, and that's, again, if you're going to invest in two pieces from the same offense, the Chargers offense is definitely one of the offenses I'm okay doing that at.
Yep. No, exactly. I fully agree there. Now I'm back on the clock here with the wide receiver board looking like Deontay Johnson, Jalen Waddle in particular. Running backs, just straight dead zone at this point. And then obviously the pick of the litter in terms of, for the most part, the quarterbacks aside from those top three names. I'm going straight back to wide receiver. Jalen Waddle and Deontay Johnson are very close in my rankings. So is DJ Moore. I actually do think I have DJ Moore the highest, so I'm going to take DJ Moore.
Yep, no problem there. And I have Deontay Johnson ranked the highest out of these guys, but it is close there with Jalen Waddle and Jerry Jeudy followed after him. And I think Allen Robinson shortly after those guys. So I'm going to go with Deontay Johnson with my next pick here. I could have went again with a running back, but I don't love this Jacobs, area of the draft. Jacobs would have been my highest rated running back, but not an area of the draft I'm excited to be attacking. I was hoping Kyler Murray fell back to me. He did not. Jalen Hurts is still available. Dalton Schultz is still available if I wanted to go with a tight end. This is a 3 wide receiver, 1 flex league. I built out a hero RB. I don't like the running back position. I'm going to probably grab another wide receiver here. I hate to sound like a broken record by taking Allen Robinson in every single draft, but he is on the board again for me, so I'm going to take him as my flex option. And again, we talk about this all the time. You're going to build out a hero RB. You're going to go a little fragile at the beginning of your draft and not take a bunch of running backs. Then you want to win your flex positions. And to me, Allen Robinson, the 3 wide receiver stack that I have, plus Allen Robinson in my flex is the strongest, maybe outside of, team 5 and some of these other teams that went wide receiver heavy that people are going to have in those positions at a full PPR 3 wide receiver league.
Yep, for sure. And I just wanted to reiterate, Bush kind of, gave Team 5 the jinx, if you will. But just imagine that start. Only you sub out Jalen Waddle in exchange for David Montgomery, and then he has the perfect 0 RB start. Because man, 4 out of those 5 picks from T5 are absolutely phenomenal. It's just the David Montgomery forcing your running back one spot there is not ideal at all. But either way, I'm back on the clock here. My highest ranked player is Marquise Brown. So as a result, I will take Marquise Brown there to be my wide receiver 3 on this team.
Yeah, and again, we talked about it in the intro, but if you're going to deviate in the dead zone, if this guy had been building out a 0 RB and Travis Etienne was on the board at 4.8, then you can deviate in that area of the dead zone. But when you're deviating for volume plays or, projections or guys that might be questionable from a talent perspective, that's what you don't want to be doing. So if anybody was wondering, well, if you're not supposed to take David Montgomery, who are you supposed to take? The answer is probably another wide receiver. But if you're going to take a running back, it should be, an Etienne, a Hall, a Akers, a Dobbins, one of those archetypes, young running backs, ambiguous situations that we can project a high ceiling for because of the unknown factor.
Yep, I agree. Back here at the 606, I do see a tier quarterback or a tier break at my quarterback position. But I also see Michael Thomas on the board, and I just don't think that's real. I'm taking Michael Thomas. I'm not thinking hard about that.
And you made my decision a lot easier because I would have been between the same 2 players, and I get Jalen Hurts now. So Jalen Hurts, another guy that on Sleeper goes a little bit lower than he does on Underdog. On Underdog, there's no separation between him, Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, those type of guys. They all go within like a couple picks of each other. And I do see routinely that Jalen Hurts will slide, 12 picks, 10 picks after those guys in ADP on Sleeper. So if you're drafting on Sleeper, Jalen Hurts should definitely be a big time target for you. I'm on the board here at the 706. Again, I'm not quite out of the woods as far as the dead zone is concerned. None of these running backs really scream value to me. I know I can get a Ramondre Stevenson type a little bit later, so I'm not going to be going in that direction. At the tight end position, little early, I think, for a guy like Zach Ertz, little early for like a Dawson Knox type. Probably not going to go in that position either. I am going to just go with like my highest rated wide receiver here, get myself some depth. You can start up to 4 wide receivers. We want to account for bye weeks. We want to account for a bust. And we want to make sure that our wide receiver spots are better than pretty much everybody else's in the league because I only have, one stable running back with Alvin Kamara as it currently stands. So I'm going to go with Rashad Bateman here as my highest rated wide receiver. He's a guy that I think I'm, getting higher and higher on as the offseason goes along with the Lamar Jackson coming back. Rashad Bateman's clearly the number 1 receiver, not weapon, but number 1 wide receiver in that offense for a quarterback that once led the league in passing touchdowns.
You made the decision very easy for me. I was between Rashad Bateman and the guy I'm going to take, and I sound like a broken record. And if you guys have been watching the channel for at least the last year and a half, you'll know that I would run up to the podium in a live draft and submit the name of Elijah Moore.
Yeah, I need to get an Elijah Moore jersey for my background because we just have so much Elijah Moore stock invested that we need to get on board with that. So you're back on the clock here. You got, you hammered out some wide receivers. You got a superhero RB going. You don't have any onesie positions yet. Is that the direction you're going to go?
Yeah, an elite onesie that I actually have ranked. Again, 4-point passing touchdown format, but I have ranked as my quarterback 7 right now, and that's going to be Trey Lance. The uncertainty, unknown factor is going to apply to him, especially in more home leagues, but Trey Lance has got the potential to be this year's Jalen Hurts, but in a better offense. And I'm taking the shot on that. I'm taking the swing on that any chance I can.
Yeah, and again, another thing not to do is what Team 2 did. Great start. Christian McCaffrey, Javonte Williams. You get yourself a superhero RB start where you had a great opportunity to build out a strong team in a 3 wide receiver, full PPR. Why draft Ezekiel Elliott and Josh Jacobs? Why not go
No need.
with Mike Evans was staring you in the face for an elite start in this draft, and you could have gone, Mike Williams or Jerry Jeudy on the way back in the 4th round, and you could have had a phenomenal start to this draft with Lamar Jackson at the 5-2, which I think is also a great value. But don't do what Team 2 did. I feel like, we always talk about you can't lose your fantasy leagues in the first round, but you can't win your fantasy leagues in the first round, but you can lose it. I feel like we should start saying you can't win your fantasy leagues in the mid rounds, but you can lose it as well, because people will start with a couple good picks to start their draft and then just completely swan dive their chances of winning by drafting a bunch of dead zone running backs when they don't need to.
I'm glad you mentioned that, right? Because for the most part, on a, even level, let's just say you're an even skill in terms of player evaluation to a lot of the players in your league. Obviously, there's going to be some differences, but for the purpose, let's just say, everybody's kind of on a similar aggregate. The thing that you can use to your advantage, especially in more home casual leagues, is structuring your team the proper way. And if you're Team 2, you might just say, well, Elliott's the best on my board. Jacob's the best on my board. But at that point, given your league scoring, given your format, taking the high upside wide receivers and limiting your exposure, again, to running backs in that range, which, again, are a more fragile position, have less upside comparatively between an Ezekiel Elliott type and a Mike Evans, T. Higgins type, you're automatically putting your team in your worst spot. I'll let you make the pick, and then I'll go back into what I was saying.
Yeah.
You could just set whoever it wants.
Yeah, I just went Tony Pollard there.
Oh,
That's who I was
perfect.
going to go with anyway. So
Perfect.
I grabbed myself a great RB2 in a hero RB type of build like a Tony Pollard. I
Yep.
was playing. The reason I was going to pick Tony Pollard there was because I was going to play the ADP game that Dawson Knox fell back to me, because Team 5, Team 4,
Smart.
Team 3, and Team 1 all had tight ends. Obviously, Team 2 just took Dawson Knox, and he might have taken him on the way back if he didn't take him there. So that was a risky game I was willing to take, but I also like Pat Freiermuth as well, so I would have just went with him on the way back in the 9th round. But like Danny said, you want to structure your teams in a way that ideally, this is no like definite hard and fast rule, but typically in the first 8 rounds, you probably only want to have 2 running backs on your team. You want to have, and again, this is all going to depend on scoring.
Max 3.
Yeah, max 3, depending on your scoring format. If you have a 2 wide receiver, 2 running back, 1 flex start, then you're okay probably going with 3 running backs if the value falls to you. But if you're in like a 2 running back, 3 wide receiver, 2 flex type of league, 1 or 2 running backs maximum is what you want to have in the first 8 rounds of your draft. I typically like to get an elite onesie if I can, usually a quarterback, based on how I have my ranking set up. But sometimes I get myself an elite tight end if it falls that way. And I also do love those mid-round tight ends with Dallas Goedert and Dalton Schultz and Zach Ertz, Dawson Knox, and some of those guys as well. So that is the end of the video here. Danny, you could quickly talk about your team, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yep. The last disclaimer I want to add, again, you guys would have heard my rant before Corey's pick, but I mean, you could figure out what I was going to say there in terms of prioritizing structure. If you realize the room of players or room of drafters in your league are similar talent in terms of player evaluation, make sure you know the most in terms of structure. Last thing I'll say, the reason why we want to attack the meaty wide receiver range in those rounds 3 to 7 range, obviously typically the running back dead zone, is the fact that if we're comparing teams right now, my Marquise Brown in the flex versus Team 8's Antonio Gibson in the flex. Marquise Brown has the chance to be a top 5 overall wide receiver to start the year. Antonio Gibson is probably capped out at about RB12, RB13 to start the year. So in terms of point potential, I am getting a player that can realistically be an elite difference maker at his position versus forcing a pick because I need a running back too. Or in this case, an RB3 because I had 2 running backs. So you have to think about it contextually, because for the most part in your mid rounds, you're drafting players that you're going to rely upon mostly as flexes. So you want those players that you pick to have potential to not only be a good flex option, but potentially be, this year's Jamar Chase, this year's Cooper Kupp, these emerging elite wide receivers we see in this range time and time again, year and year again.
Yeah, exactly. Makes a ton of sense there. So If you guys want to take some of this advice straight into action, we have a special promotion going right now. Link will be in the pinned comment down below. It's linked also in the description as well. You can sign up and deposit on underdogfantasy.com using the promo code FSE. You'll get 100% back on whatever you put in. So if you put in $10, you'll get 20. If you put in 20, you'll get 40, etc. You'll also be entered into a giveaway to win one of 5 $50 free site credits as a thank you for using our promo code. Underdog is doing this giveaway for us. And as you guys know, by using our promo code, if you guys are new around here, we also give you guys our redraft and our dynasty rankings manifestos totally for free for using our promo code Underdog Fantasy, promo code FSE. Links all down in the description, all down in the pinned comments as well. And we also have a special tool. Shout out to Jonathan Price 33 Bear in our audience is creating a checklist so that you guys, when you're drafting, can check off players that are going off the board that you can download from our redraft rankings manifesto. So big shout out to him for creating that. That should be live by the end of the week. So if you guys have a draft this weekend, that will be live for you guys to use by the end of the week. And you can get all of that stuff that I just mentioned with a $10 deposit on underdogfantasy.com using the promo code FSE. So if that interests you, check out the links. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.